This is a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage in the trial of Scot Peterson, the Parkland School resource officer. We're up to segment number 2 of today. Let's go to the courtroom.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. When we're back at those same seats, you may be seated. All the parties may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you using the notepads, I'll give you a moment to get the notepads back out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, when we took our quick restroom break, we had just finished the cross-examination of the witness who remains on the stand. We're now going to turn to the state's redirect examination. Mr. Kilroy, when you're ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Burton.
Good morning.
Did you know that Scot Peterson was the assigned school resource officer at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas?
I did.
And were you aware that he had a similar radio system set up with the school radio and a police radio as you did?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. You testified under cross-examination that you have to constantly monitor the radios, including the school radio. Is that true? Is that what you testified to?
Yes.
Would it be important to monitor that radio in case, for instance, a school monitor sent out a call that a crazy kid was entering the campus?
That's important.
How do you charge your school monitor? How do you charge your radios?
It's plugged in. It's a Motorola radio, and plug it in every night before I go home, and then use it again in the morning.
For the school radio, so you plug it in at night. So you don't have, is that so you don't have to charge it during the day?
That's correct.
Is that so you can constantly monitor the radio during the day while you're on campus?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you were picked up by Medina, by the campus monitor Medina, did you tell him where to go?
I did not.
Did he tell you where you were going?
He took me where he wanted to go.
Did you at any point in time during that cart ride ask him what was going on?
I asked him what was going on right when I met him.
Why did you, as a police officer, ask someone such as Medina that information?
I needed information to give to my dispatch.
Is that because it's important to gather real-time intelligence from all variety of different sources?
It is.
Now, you were asked on cross-examination about when you're at your high school about having a long rifle. And you stated you keep it in a gun safe in the school?
We keep it in a gun safe in my office.
Are you aware that some officers keep it in the trunk of their Dodge Durango that they keep in the parking lot, for instance, of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas?
I wouldn't know that.
And with your bulletproof vest, even on campus, even when you're at Coral Ridge High School, you wear your vest at all times.
Yes.
Why do you do that?
It's for safety, and also you never know when you're going to have to react to something.
Even something that might not be on your campus?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, when you got to the position where Medina ultimately dropped you off on the golf cart, you didn't hear any shots, did you?
There was no gunfire.
If you heard shots, then a different component of your training would have kicked in.
Yes.
What component of that? What do you do if you hear shots?
I would immediately go to the gunfire.
And why do you immediately go to the gunfire?
Because that's how we're trained.
Now, does your training use the word precisely? Like, would you have had to have known the shots were coming from classroom 1, 2, 3, 4?
No.
Or just a general area?
General area.
And is the purpose of going towards the shots something to the tune so you can gather additional real-time information as you're going?
It's to eliminate the threat.
So you don't stay put in a position of cover for 48 minutes, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you stated on cross-examination that you believe Scot Peterson when he told you the information when you were 40 yards apart.
I did.
And because you believed him, is that why you exposed your entire back to the 1200 building to stand on the curb and scope out a parking lot?
I believe that the information that he was giving me was true.
Is that why you stood in that position?
Yes.
Based upon your friendship, your relationship for 7 years?
Correct.
Now, that information was false. There was no one in the parking lot, was there?
We never found anyone.
So is that the wrong intelligence?
It could have been, if you possibly factor in the +1 rule, but if we didn't find anyone.
Now, you testified, you actually stood up and you said that he was looking east and west. So he had a full range of something to that tune, right? And for the record, I moved my neck from left to right.
Correct.
Okay. From where he was standing, would that enable him to see? Let me see if I can get this one. For the record, I'm showing Serenian as the fence exhibit. It's marked. Oh, demonstrative. Never mind.
Yeah, it's not in there.
Demonstrative.
Go ahead.
What's marked is fence F. From the position that you were in, and the
Yes.
position that Mr. Peterson was in, he was scanning left, which means he would be looking west towards the football field.
Correct.
North, straight, which would be up north, correct? Towards kind of like the east side doors.
Correct.
Then to the east, which is the parking lot.
Correct.
Thank you. Did he ever relay to you from those east side doors as he was looking north that he saw 5 kids run out?
That was not relayed.
Would that fit under the category of real-time intelligence?
Yes.
Now, you were asked on cross multiple times as to why you didn't go in. Did you not go in because you were given intelligence, false intelligence from the defendant that the shooter could be in the parking lot?
At the time, I didn't know it was false, but based on the intelligence that he gave me, I took a position to secure the parking lot, thinking that there possibly could be somebody in there.
When you were on scene, were you aware that Mr. Peterson told fellow Coral Springs officers, 2nd or 3rd floor of the 1200 building?
I didn't hear that until later.
Now, there were some questions about you never going in once again. Did you partake in the rescue portion of
Yes, I did.
the rescue mission?
Yes.
Now, on cross-examination, Mr. Arglash asked you about responsibilities of school resource officers, that you're trained, you have similar training as other Coral Springs officers, let's just say road patrol. Do you have additional training because you're a school resource officer?
Yes.
What is that additional training?
Active shooter training.
What is your job as the school resource officer at your high school?
To mentor, protect, teach, handle crime,
What do you mean by protect?
protect the students, staff
From what?
from possible danger.
I want to play a couple of audio transcripts that Mr. Walshe played for you. Aaron, if I could please bring up the link to that. It's state set.
I think you're good. Yep. Court Deputy Unit, all the TVs remain off, correct?
If you could please go to the first one Mr. Walshe highlighted, which I believe was 225:38.
I need to shut down Stone and Douglas. The intersection.
Sorry, Mr. Killer.
225.
225.
225:38. I apologize.
Keep the school locked down, gentlemen.
We can pause it there. Officer Burton, get the school locked down, gentlemen. As part of your training, if the shooting is still going on, what is the officer supposed to be doing?
Going towards the gunfire.
Are they supposed to be in their position?
No, sir.
Judge, I'm just going to object. The prosecutor is making a gesture in court that's inconsistent with testimony.
Well, the objection's overruled. The jury saw what the witness. Again, ladies and gentlemen, what the lawyers say, I guess what the lawyers do is not evidence. The evidence comes from the witness stand right there and in the form of the exhibits. Over the defense objection. Go ahead, Mr. Kim.
Mr. Savitsky, can you go back to 223:26?
Keep the school locked.
Okay.
01. It's in 17 Juliet 3, 17 Bravo 3, 17 Bravo 4.
Juliet 3, we have possible, could be firecrackers. I think we got shots fired. Possible shots fired.
Did you hear where Mr. Peterson said shots fired, possible shots fired?
Yes.
Mr. Savitsky, could you please go to 226:40, approximately 3 minutes later?
Juliet 3, we're going to Bravo. I hear shots fired.
Did you hear Mr. Peterson there say, I hear shots fired?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Savitsky, could you please go down to back to 225:56?
26, so we also heard it over by inside the 1200 building.
Did you hear where Mr. Peterson said inside the 1200 building?
Yes.
Now going to 227:30.
Hey, Juliet 3, make sure I have a unit over in the front of the school. Make sure nobody comes inside the school.
Did you hear Mr. Peterson say, make sure I have a unit over in front of the school?
Yes.
The I part of that, is that consistent with an incident commander or someone who's the first on scene, taking control of the scene?
Yes.
Explain that to the jury in terms of first on scene. Did they call the shots?
Yes. In an incident like this, they would call shots, and then when more police personnel show up, then the admin will start taking over the bulk of the school.
And is that always immediate, or does that sometimes take a time period?
It takes a little bit of time.
So it'd be almost like relieving them of command.
Correct.
Aaron, if we could go to 228.
Building 13 and 900 building.
Alex, do not approach the 12 or 1300 buildings. Stay at least 500 feet away at this point.
Yeah, stop it there. Stay at least 500 feet away at this point. You testified under, I guess, direct and cross-examination about training. For when a shooting is occurring, what are you trained to do?
Go towards the gunfire.
Are you trained to tell other officers to stay at least 500 feet back?
I am not.
And if you could go to 229:02.
10-4, fire rescue is being notified.
Jerry, does he know where the shooter is?
Did you ask, or did you hear where, or was that Mr. Peterson?
Correct.
Did you hear where he asked, does he know where the shooter is?
I heard that.
Okay. Now, is that something that if Mr. Peterson peeked his head into the building, looked into the building, went into the building, he would already have that real-time intelligence?
Correct.
So asking Perry whether Kyle Lamont, whether he knows where the shooter is at after the shooting, that's not really real-time intelligence for the shooting, is it?
No, sir.
Now, there were some questions, and I understand different radio to use by Coral Springs and BSO. There's some questions about patching. Could you hear the dispatch that was just played?
Yes.
Now, based upon your training and experience, you had a rifle with you, an M4 that day. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay. If you didn't have the M4, if you just had your 6 Sauer, does training prevent you from seeking out an active shooter?
No, you would still go in with your handgun.
But given just the inherent nature of officers responding as backup or second responding officer, how important is the information being relayed by the first officer, the incident commander? How important is that information to be accurate?
Very important.
Why is that?
Because it dictates how the responding officers will respond to the scene.
And did the information you received dictate you turning your back to the 1200 building?
Yes.
In your experience telling officers to stay back 500 feet, would that slow down officers responding to an area?
It would.
Now, in your training, are you taught that every shot fired in an active shooter case could be another person getting hit?
Yes.
Are you taught the importance of stopping bleeding?
Yes.
Can you just explain that to the jury?
So as police officers, we're trained with first aid equipment and tourniquets. Tourniquets will go on upper extremities and also lower extremities. On your chest, for a gunshot wound to the chest, we would use chest seal.
And are all those devices utilized in order to stop people from bleeding out?
I'm sorry, repeat the
Or
question.
all those instruments, the tourniquet?
They're designed to stop bleeding, yes.
Because is that because time is of the essence?
Yes.
Mr. Argyle asked you about Mirandizing students. That's for criminal investigation, is it not?
Yes.
As an SRO, though, you were also part of administrative searches.
Correct.
Can you explain the difference there?
Miranda would be where we're taking somebody to jail. An administrative search would be with the assistance of a vice principal, possibly searching the book bag of a student.
And for an administrative search, is it a lower threshold than that utilized by police officers?
Yeah, the administrators can do reasonable suspicion.
When you saw Mr. Peterson in his position of cover, was he towards the left side of the hallway, or was he towards the right side of the hallway?
I would describe it, he was on the west side of the hallway.
The west side?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if a shooter was in the parking lot, would standing on the west side of the 700 hallway expose you potentially to shots?
Correct.
So if a shooter was actually in the parking lot, Mr. Peterson would have wanted to stand on the right side of the hallway for cover.
Correct.
You were also asked about adrenaline dumps and tunnel vision, auditory exclusion. Do these things completely prevent officers from doing their jobs?
No.
What's the purpose of training?
The purpose of training is to make you the most proficient at what you're going to do.
Is it also so that if you're in these situations that you respond?
Correct.
And is part of training also to deal with multitasking?
Yes, there's some trainings where.
Is multitasking a part of being a law enforcement officer, being a police officer?
Yes, sir.
The real-time information, the real-time intelligence gathered from Medina, white male, burgundy, ROTC, was that accurate information?
It was.
Mr. Arglash asked you, he showed you the demonstrative aid and highlighted different areas that the shooter could have been here, shooter could have been here, shooter could have been here, shooter could have been here. In those situations, while the shooting is still occurring, what's the remedy to figure out where the shooter is? What are you trained to do?
To go towards it and investigate.
Is that to find out precisely where the shooter is?
Yes.
Just one moment, John. And nothing further on the redirection.
Okay, based on that, any recross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Officer Burton, did I hear you correctly? Did you just tell this prosecutor that the reason why you didn't go into the 1200 building is because my client told you that there could be shooter or shooters in the parking lot? Is that your testimony?
Excuse me, sir?
Did you or did you not just tell Mr. Killoran that the reason why you didn't go into that building at any time is because my client told you that there might be shooter or shooters behind you in the parking lot?
The information that Deputy Peterson provided me, I believed at the time.
That information, northeast parking lot, was given to you by Andrew Medina before you ever even made contact with my client. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Medina also told you before you ever made contact with my client that the shooter or shooters were last seen around the 3-story building, also known as the 1200 building, correct?
That's correct.
And instead of going right in, you took a position of cover, did you not?
When I went to the building is when I looked to the left and Deputy Peterson provided me the information about the parking lot.
Which was the same information Medina had already given to you prior to you getting in that position of cover. Yes or no?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Which was the same information that Medina had already given to you prior to you getting into that position of cover. Yes or no?
I don't know, sir.
You told this prosecutor that you're supposed to go towards the sounds, right? That's what the training tells you to do.
Correct.
When you don't know where the sounds are coming from because of a pronounced echo or for whatever reason, don't you then take a tactical position of cover and wait for more information?
We are trained to go towards the gunfire. If you can't find it while you're traveling to it, slow down. You may have to gather some intel to eventually find the location.
And didn't that look like exactly what my client was doing in real time? Yes or no, sir?
Was this during the shooting, sir? Because I wasn't there during
I'm talking about the 20 to 30 minutes that you see him.
No.
Doesn't it look like he's trying to gain additional real-time intelligence? Yes or no?
Yes, sir, he was.
And you thought he was doing that honestly, correct?
At the time, sir, correct.
Passionately?
Correct.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And even though Andrew Medina, prior to you getting to the scene, tells you that the shooter was last seen in the 3-story building and north parking lot, you don't go in. Isn't that correct?
When I show up on scene, I talk to Deputy Peterson and he provides me the information about possibly in the parking lot.
Which was the same information that Medina had already given you, correct?
Medina said it was a possibility in the parking lot. That's correct.
And so the answer to my question is, yes, I chose not to go in. Isn't that correct?
Counsel testifying. The answer to my question is, I'm sorry, the answer to my question, give me the answer.
No, that, as to that objection, that's overruled, sir. You can answer the question. Go ahead.
Okay, can you repeat the question?
Still, you chose not to go in after speaking to Medina and him telling you that the shooter or shooters could be in the parking lot. You chose not to go in. Yes or no, sir?
No, my actions were dictated on Deputy Peterson's intel, sir.
Even though you claimed you were part of a rescue mission, you never went inside to help any of the kids that were inside that building. Yes or no, sir?
We're trained in active shooter situations that until the shooter is found, I know it sounds harsh, but sometimes we can't treat victims.
So you never went inside to treat any of the victims. Yes or no, sir?
I did not go in the building, sir.
Prosecutor asked you, if Peterson had peeked in the building or looked in the building, he would have known X, Y, and Z. You remember him asking you those questions?
I do.
Same question to you, sir. Had you peeked in the building or opened up the door to look, you would have been able to see those same things. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
But you chose not to leave your position of cover to do that. Isn't that correct, sir?
Because I was under the assumption that based on the intel Deputy Peterson provided me, somebody was in the parking lot.
Let's listen to, first do you remember when the prosecutor just played you at 2:25:26, and then he asked you, was that Peterson's voice saying inside the 1200 building? You do recall him saying, by inside the 1200 building, correct?
You have to repeat the video.
Let's play that one first, if we could. The 2:25:26. By inside.
Building. It's going to be right off of Kohberger Road by the senior lot. Keep the school locked down, gentlemen.
That's Scott's voice, locking down the school, right?
That's correct.
Attention all units not working the signal 33, go to Bravo channel for regular traffic.
Some students say they thought it was firecrackers and were not sure. By the football field.
That wasn't his voice saying by the football field. Firecrackers,
That was
correct?
that was
not. That was another deputy.
correct.
26. So we also heard it over by inside the 1200 building.
Yes. He's not saying inside alone. He's saying by inside, correct?
I believe I heard over by the 1200 building.
If we can play that again. You tell me if you heard him saying by inside.
Crashes and we're not sure. By the football field. All right, 26. So we also heard it over by inside the 1200 building. We're locking.
Was that Scot Peterson's voice saying we heard it over by inside the 1200 building?
That's correct.
And that was your belief as well. It was by inside, correct? Meaning by, it could be in the parking lot area, because you learned that from Adina, right?
Objection is to counsel testimony.
Yeah, that's sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make it clear, you all are going to decide what you hear on this exhibit as to any exhibits. Again, what the lawyers tell you is not evidence. What any witness tells you who did not hear this themselves is not evidence. You all will decide what the evidence is. Go ahead, sir. You may ask your next question.
Your belief in real time was that the possibility of where the shooter or shooters might be located included both inside the 1200 building, correct? That was one of the possibilities, yes?
No, the information Medina provided was by the 300 building. Okay. Sorry, the 1200 building.
Didn't you already testify that one of the possibilities was you thought the shooter or shooters may be inside the 1200 building, sir? Didn't you say that earlier when I crossed you?
At some point, yes.
And finally, can you please identify this 2:45? So this is 18 minutes after the shooting stopped, right? 2:45 would have been that. I just want you to identify whose voice this is at 2:45. And while he's setting that up, I think you said during cross that when you don't know where the shots are coming from, either because for whatever reason, right, you didn't know because you didn't hear them, or if somebody doesn't know where the shots are coming from, you take a tactical position of cover and stand out in the open, correct?
That's correct.
And you also said you don't just start guessing. You don't just start running to try to guess when you're dealing with football fields of possibilities, correct?
Objection asked and answered, Your Honor.
That's sustained.
That wouldn't be tactically sound, correct, sir?
Objection is asked and answered, Your Honor.
That's sustained.
Let's go ahead and listen to the statement. You tell me if that's Scot Peterson's voice.
The only 43 I had was from Coral Springs that called in and advised he was...
283 was the 1200, 1300 building last time we heard the shots.
Okay. Was that Scot Peterson's voice saying between the 12 and 1300 building last time we heard shots?
That's correct.
No doubt that was Scot Peterson's voice, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, State, is the witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, sir, you may step down. Thank you very much. While he's doing that, State, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Stacy Locale to the stand.
Stacy Locale.
And if I can have you come all the way up here to the witness stand, please. Once you reach it, but before you have a seat, if you can just stop and look at me, please. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated. And once you're seated, if I can get you to scoot that chair all the way up as far as it will go. Can you please state your full name and spell your full name?
Stacy Lippel, STACEY LIPPEL.
Mr. Klinger, you may inquire.
Thank you, sir. I think it's still morning, so good morning, Ms. Lippel.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing as well as I can.
Okay. Could you please tell the jury what your occupation is?
I'm a teacher
And where are you a teacher?
at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School.
How long have you taught at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
I just finished my 11th year there.
And what do you teach at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
I teach English and also creative writing.
And where is your classroom located at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
Right now,
Yes.
in the 200 building.
Was it located in a different building before?
Yes.
Where was it? Where was your classroom located in on February 14, 2018?
The 1200 building.
And on what floor in the 1200 building?
The third floor.
And would it be at the west end or the east end of the 1200 building?
It was towards the east end.
Was it the first classroom on the east end?
No, I was in the second class from the east end stairwell.
And do you know whose classroom was the first classroom toward the east end of the floor?
Yes, it was Scott Beagle's classroom.
On February 14, 2018, did you know who Scot Peterson was?
Yes,
How do you know who Scot Peterson was?
he was our school resource officer.
Had you had much contact with Mr. Peterson?
Not too much.
How would you describe if at all, your relationship with him?
It was kind of a casual relationship. I didn't really have a lot of interaction with him. I didn't see really him as a dominating force in the school from my perspective.
Okay. Did you see him at all that day, the 14th of February, 2018?
No, not that I recall.
That afternoon, were you teaching a class around approximately 2:15 in the afternoon?
I was.
And what was that class about?
I was teaching creative writing that day in that class period.
Do you remember approximately how many students you had in your class?
It's a very large class. Electives could have up to 40, so I had either 38 to 40.
What was the noise level like in the class?
Very active. It's normally a very interactive class. And because it was Valentine's Day, we were playing music, and it was definitely an animated environment.
Did something happen in and around between 2:15 and maybe 2:23 or so that caught your attention?
Yes. We heard some popping sounds, like a succession of maybe 3 or 4 popping sounds. And then a few seconds later, another succession of popping sounds.
Before we go any further with that, I do want to backtrack just for a second. Earlier in that day, had there been any type of fire drills or any code red or any type of training or anything happened earlier that day?
Yes, we had a scheduled fire drill. I don't remember how often we had to have them, maybe once a month, and it was a scheduled one that we knew about. We actually had a meeting, all departments had meetings with their administrators that morning before school started, just to talk about that we were going to have a scheduled drill and just the protocol, what we need to do. And I do remember that, we were told to kind of speed up, the evacuation, because maybe we've been a little slow before that.
Okay, and could you explain to the jury, since you're on the third floor, east end, what the evacuation procedure was for your classroom?
So we always have like a designated meeting spot. In high school, there are thousands of students, and in hallways, hundreds can accumulate. So it's impossible to like hold hands and keep track of everybody. So we know where we're supposed to go. So anytime the fire alarm goes off, it's just meet me at our place. I have an emergency folder with all my students' names in it, so that I take attendance when I get there. And everyone knows where to go. So we always exit a certain way. So we exit my classroom and we exit to the left to go down the east stairwell.
And then there's a meeting location outside where you all gather?
Correct.
And where was that?
It's usually in the grassy area by Kohberger Road.
And that was for a situation when there was a fire alarm going off?
Correct.
Had you had any training or any background on what to do when there was a code red being called?
Yes, we're always told to accumulate in the hard corner of our classroom, and a hard corner is adjacent to the hallway so that we're out of the line of sight of our door, because our doors have a window in them. So anytime there's a code red, we know to lock our doors and if we have time, if they have the ability to cover our window, and then to go over to the hard corner. So no matter how big or how small your classroom is, you got to get everybody over there as quickly as you can.
All right, let's return to the afternoon when you said that you had heard popping sounds, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you describe what happened in your classroom when those popping sounds were heard?
So the first time we heard the popping sounds, it caused us all to pause because it was an unusual sound, but nothing that sounded menacing to me. And so we just sort of stopped and we said, what is that? What's that noise? And immediately I'm thinking it's firecrackers or balloons, which is not unheard of because it was one of those days, a lot of animation in the school. And so I just assumed that's what it was. Definitely didn't sound like gunshots to me.
And when you say a lot happening that day, a lot of animation, that's because it's Valentine's Day.
Right. I mean, everybody's all, crazy and, acting silly or sad, depending on the situation. So the air is different when it's a holiday in school. It's not like a typical school day.
And when you first heard those shots, did you know if they were coming from inside or outside the building?
It sounded like it was coming from outside. So because I'm on the corner, it sounded to me like it was between the 1200 building and the 700 building. There's sort of like another building. I don't remember the name of it. It's where the auditorium is. So there's like 3 buildings in a row. It sounded like it was coming from that area outside.
And how did the students react to those popping sounds?
It really depended. I can tell you from my perspective, the students who were around me, I know, I have to speak from what I remember. It's just that I know what some students said after and maybe who were on the other side of the class. But in my vicinity, they were looking at me, asking me, what do you think that is? And so no one around me said, it sounds like gunshots. They were like, it sounds like somebody said balloons popping. And then I said, because then we heard it a second time. Then I said, it sounds like it's a computer cart just sort of being pushed over, on the concrete between buildings. It sounded kind of hard, at that point when I heard the second one, when I was trying to, kind of understand what that noise could be.
Okay. Now, after you heard those popping sounds twice, what happened next?
The fire alarm went off.
Okay. And so is this now going to be sort of like what happened in the morning? The same type of situation where you would be starting to evacuate?
Yes, I mean, the protocol would be the same. It wasn't surprising. We've had fire alarms go off several times in one day. So at that point, when the fire alarm went off, I'm thinking there was nothing that would cause me not to evacuate. I wasn't concerned. It didn't sound, like I said, like anything menacing. So as soon as it went off, I'll meet you guys over at the spot. I yelled over everybody. And then I thought in my head, somebody pulled it as a joke. I was thinking maybe I should grab my keys, maybe told everybody to grab their backpacks because it's the end of the day, 20 minutes left in class. We might be dismissed by then after that. So then I thought maybe it's culinary cooks a lot, they burn a lot, so that could have set off the fire alarm. So nothing alerted me that was strange, so we just evacuated.
Culinary, is that in the same building as you were, or are they in a different building?
They're in a different building.
Right, so an alarm goes off the whole school?
Correct,
Throughout
right.
the school?
Mm-hmm.
All right. in the morning and in the afternoon when that alarm goes off. What exactly are your precise duties? What do you have to do, or what are you supposed to do in response to hearing that alarm?
Right, get everybody out of the classroom and out of the building as quickly as possible. That's my job.
And how about the door to the classroom? How does that work?
So you lock the doors. We did not have automatic locking doors. So I open the door, kids start to leave, exit where they're supposed to exit. I wait, I hold the door open, I wait for the last kid to get out. I close the door behind me and lock it behind me.
Okay. And did you do that afternoon?
Yes.
Okay. After you locked the door, what happened next?
I walked a couple of steps, and right in front of me are all the kids. It's not uncommon for there to be sort of like a log jam in front of the stairs, because it's like hundreds of kids trying to get out, in to like sort of funnel in. So there was kind of like a log jam, and so I was behind most of the kids, all my students. There may have been students behind me from other classes. But then all of a sudden I hear screaming, and then the crowd just starts to push back. So where everybody was going forward, everything stops. I hear screaming, and then the students start pushing towards me. So I turn. I don't hear any gunshots yet, but everyone's running towards me. So I go to my door and open up, and then I start hearing gunshots.
Now, before you had testified to the jury that you had heard popping sound.
Correct.
Is this now a different type of sound?
Absolutely. It's definitely gunshots. Very, very loud.
Very loud.
Very.
All right. So you now, in your mind, what is that telling you to do?
It's telling me to get the kids into a safe location, get my door open as soon as possible, and get them in there and get into the hard corner.
Okay, so would it be fair to say at this point then you've moved from a fire alarm evacuation to a code red, get everybody into a safe place in the classroom, away from the door and the windows? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So in order to do that, what did you do? What action did you take?
Opening, besides unlocking my door?
Well, that would be the beginning, yes, to unlock the door.
Right. So I'm unlocking my door. I stay at my door. I keep it open. I hear the gunshots, but it's chaos at this point, because kids are screaming. Kids are running past me, and then kids are going wherever they can to seek shelter. So I've got some of my students coming into my class, students I've never seen before come into my class. I also see them going into Scott Beagle's class. He was doing the same thing I was doing. We were sort of neck and neck. I don't know that he had closed his door when I closed my door, but we were definitely like right there next to each other, and then shuttling kids into our class. So I'm standing there at my door, and then I don't know at what point, but I saw the shooter come out of the stairwell and stand at the very end of the east stairwell.
And where exactly were you when you saw it?
I was at my door with my door open, my back to my door, but facing Scott and facing the shooter.
All right. And so Scott Beagle then is also just, if I have it right, it would be towards your right?
He was to my left.
To your left.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, his classroom is, if I'm walking out of my classroom, he's on my left.
Okay. And if you just so you're walking in, he's
right. He would be to the right, but his back is to the shooter, where I'm facing the shooter.
Okay. And so you're both, when you first see the shooter, you're both outside your classroom.
Yes.
Okay. And then what happened?
So I remember lots of smoke in the hallway. It was just very surreal. Just the shooter standing there, he's just splaying his rifle back and forth. It's just a barrage of bullets. And he's shooting down the hallway. Kids are still running. Kids are still coming in. And then when I felt that it was the right time, I think I saw him walking towards us, Scott and I. I turned to this side, because my door is kind of open this way, and I turn to grab both handles of my door to close it. And as I'm doing that, I just remember yelling to Scott to close his door, just close your door. And then I felt like a very hot, searing, thing glide across my skin. It didn't really hurt. It just felt very hot. And then I closed my door. I kind of hung on to the handle for just a couple of seconds because I just remember it's very hard you can't just let the door close. It's not going to just lock shut. You have to really yank it in that building. So I kind of held on to it for a couple of seconds. And then I jumped over to where my students were sitting. But in the seconds that it took me to jump over to the students, shots came through the window of my classroom door.
Let me stop you there just for a second, because in those crazy hectic moments when the shooter is firing and you are struggling to make sure that door closes, do you recall what Scott Beagle was doing?
He was doing the same thing. I just remember seeing him from my peripheral, standing there, and kids were, running in just like they were running into mine. So if it wasn't my classroom they were getting into, it was his classroom.
Okay. And was that your last visual of Scott Beagle?
Yes, I don't really have a memory of, I only know because I've seen the surveillance video of my hallway. So I don't have a memory of seeing him get shot, but I did see him get shot. It's just not something that I could say that I remember happening.
So you get the door closed, and I believe you just said a moment ago, you sort of jumped.
Right.
Can you explain that a little more in detail, how that happened?
Right. So I knew where to go. I knew my students, I was hoping they knew where to go. So as soon as I closed the door, I just knew that I needed to get from this point to this point, so that, because I knew there's the window right there, and the shooter was walking towards me. And so it was just immediately, as soon as I landed, and I literally took 2 big jumps, landed on the laps of my students, and then shots just came in, 3 or 4 shots came through my window.
You actually landed on the laps of something?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Were you able to see the shooter or the gun when you said the window broke?
Right, no, I didn't see the gun come through the window. I don't know where he was standing, but I'll never forget the feeling and the sound of the shots coming through the window, because you almost feel it in your chest. It's so loud.
Was that one?
Yeah.
And were you able to tell where the shots are going toward?
I didn't. I imagine, I can only assume he was trying to shoot me because he saw me through the window. But I will never forget the bullet casings that were in the classroom, because we were sitting there for quite a while. But I saw, maybe 3 or 4 copper colored casings on the ground along with glass.
And the sound at that point was?
Very, very loud. After he shot through my door, or maybe it was before he shot through my door, he was shooting Scott or into Scott's classroom, but there was just a lot of shooting right outside my door.
Okay. Since you had made that leap, you
right.
Didn't see anything outside, right?
Correct.
Then explain to us what happens after the shots are fired into your classroom.
So we just sit there. We're quiet. We're not moving. I look at the clock because I don't think this is real, and I'm looking at the clock. And I'm thinking, this can't be a drill, as crazy as that sounds, because it's the end of the school day. They would never do something like this at the end of the school day. And texts are coming in from my coworkers who are on the other side of the school, who don't really know what's going on, just asking me what's going on, because everybody at this point is locked down. And so I'm able to get a text out, there's a shooter in my building on my floor. And then I got some text out to my family, but then it was very difficult to communicate. So students were trying to do that. They were trying to communicate. It was very, very still and quiet after, the shooting. We heard a lot of shooting down the hallway.
I don't mean to be rude, but
right.
I need to interrupt you here. The loud shots are fired into your classroom.
Right.
All right. Do you hear more shots after that?
Yeah, I hear a lot of shots go down the hallway. Now my window's open. It's just nothing in between my class and the hallway at this point. So it's very loud. I can hear everything that's happening very clearly down the hallway. So lots of shooting. I can tell that it's going down the hallway because the sound gets fainter and fainter, but it's still very loud.
Okay. And when you say the window's open, you're referring to the glass.
Right, the panel of my classroom door.
Okay. So you do hear more shots, but they do become fainter?
Right.
Yeah. And you took that to mean?
That it was going down the hallway, shooting down the hallway.
Okay. Did there come a time when the shooting stopped?
Yes.
And was there in that crazy moment, do you have any idea maybe how long that was?
I don't know. I want to say it was probably a little past 2:30 that the shooting stopped. I had my eye on the clock a lot because I couldn't understand what was happening. And the closer it got to the end of the school day, the more I realized how real this really was.
Okay. How about you? How about your arm? Did there come a point when you realized what that feeling was?
It wasn't probably until like maybe 20, 30 minutes later where it's like I felt a stinging on my arm and I kind of went like this and I realized that my jacket was torn and then I looked at my hand and there was blood on my hand, but I didn't want to scare the kids, so I didn't do anything, say anything. I was okay. It didn't seem like anything really penetrated me. So I started to freak out a little bit, realizing what had happened. But it really wasn't, I didn't really feel too much at that point.
After the shooting stopped, any more sound from the hallway that you were hearing?
I heard a young man screaming for help several times. Then I heard talking, and we all assumed it was the shooter. We were, when the student was, or the young man was screaming for help, I just thought, this is the shooter trying to lure us out into the hallway. So we all just stayed put. So it was very scary to hear that. We didn't know what that was exactly.
So you heard talking, but you had no idea who was talking.
Right.
You couldn't see, obviously. You couldn't
Correct.
see out.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the student, or at least the voice that you heard who was in pain, did that continue?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
You had said there you also heard somebody screaming in pain or was in agony in the hallway.
He was just screaming for help in Spanish and in English. Yeah.
And did that continue on?
I would say he probably screamed for help maybe 3 times, if I could. It was more than once. It's like he would scream for help and then stop, and then scream for help and then stop.
Did you later become aware of what the talking was that you heard?
Yes, I found out later it was Anthony Borges, and he was on this phone trying to call I think he was talking to his father or his mother.
And he was the injured student that was calling out for help.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know about how long, I know it's hard because it's all happening and it's a shock to be trying to take it in, but do you know how long before help did arrive on the floor?
I think it was definitely over an hour, because I remember it was around 4:00 when I was outside, and I was recently outside, and my mother had called me to see what was going on. And I just remember looking at the phone, it said like 4:05 or something. So at that point, I was only outside for maybe 15 minutes. So from the time the shooting started until we were evacuated, it was probably about 3:45 when SWAT came to get us out of our rooms.
Okay, so over an hour after the shooting had started.
Right.
All right, when the SWAT team comes onto the floor, can you describe how the evacuation of your classroom proceeded?
We heard, so it was very quiet for a long time. And then we heard noise in the hallway, and it seemed like it was police officers, but they had come to grab the young man who was in the hallway. But then I just kept hearing, police open up, police open up, police open up, like down the hall, and then getting closer to my room. I heard some glass shattering, probably the police opening up the doors. And then we heard some commotion, and I started to feel like, okay, this sounds like it's help. But when he was outside our door, there were 2 SWAT officers outside our door, and I heard them say, "Police, open up." But I didn't get up. But they were easily, because my window of my door was shot out, he just reached in and opened the door. And 2 SWAT officers came into my classroom and then told us to put our hands up, pointed their guns at us, and then asked if I was the teacher. And I said yes. And so then he said, "Everybody get up and don't look down."
Was it at that point, or did there come a time that you realized whether or not anyone was injured besides you?
No, I didn't. It wasn't until my door was open and I saw Scott Beagle's body.
Take your time.
Till I saw his body in front of my classroom that I realized that this was really bad.
Did you come to the realization that anybody else in your room, in your classroom, was injured?
I didn't know because not every student of mine ended up back in my classroom, because I had 38 and I think I ended up with about 20. And I had no idea where anybody ended up. So when I saw him and then I walked out into the hallway, and it was a war zone. It was glass and bullet casings and dust. And then I look to my right, and then I see bodies and a lot of blood in the middle of the hallway.
There come a time later on whether you learned if anyone was injured in your classroom other than yourself.
Correct.
And were there any other injuries?
I had 2 students, Meadow Pollock and Joaquin Oliver, who were my students during that class period, and they were killed in the hallway.
Was anyone else injured, though, inside the 20 or so that you were able to get into your room before the shooter appeared on the floor? How about that? Was there any of those that were injured?
No one was injured.
Okay, just so in your classroom at that time, just
at that time, correct.
All right. The police officers or the SWAT team directs you and your students to evacuate and go down. Would I be correct in saying to the west stair?
Yes.
To the west stairwell. So that's almost the whole length of the hall?
It was, yeah.
Okay. And that is when you realized that Meadow and Joaquin.
Yes, I saw there were a couple of bodies to the left of me. There was a body in the alcove where the restroom was, and then I saw another body at the very end of the hallway, sort of sitting up and slumped over.
Okay. When you exited from the 3rd floor onto the west stairwell, was there any more bodies out on that landing?
No.
Did you come to learn later on that there had been a body there?
Yeah, I came to learn that Jamie Guttenberg was at the top of the stairwell, but she was moved.
No objection, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
All right. May I approach this for a moment?
You may.
I want to, if I can just show you what it's been marked to state you. It's a thumb drive. And did you have an opportunity this morning to review
Yes.
the thumb drive? All right. Does it fairly accurately represent and depict what happened that afternoon?
Yes.
This time, Judge, I'd like to move states you into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Without objection, state to you for identification will now be in evidence that is State's Exhibit 21.
And I would like to also publish.
Can we have a brief second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, just based on some scheduling issues, I'm just going to press pause on the direct examination right now. I'm going to send you to lunch a little bit earlier than I normally would and ask you to be back from lunch a little bit earlier than I usually would. We're going to pause. As soon as we come back from the lunch break, we're going to conclude the direct examination of the witness. We're then going to have the cross-examination of the witness, redirect and recross as needed, and then we'll proceed with the state's presentation. So with the same admonition as always, please do not discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, or the testimony amongst yourselves or anyone else till we reach the end of the case. I'm going to ask you to please be back in the jury room at 1:30 p.m. 1:30 p.m. Okay? Have a good lunch. Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. Everyone can be seated. State anything you need me to address before we recess for the lunch break.
No, Your Honor.
Defense, anything you need me to address?
Hang on.
So, ma'am, you can talk to anyone you want about anything you want, just not about your testimony in this case.
Okay.
And then you may step down, have a nice lunch. I'll see you right back here at 1:30 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Very much. Okay, so then we'll otherwise be in recess until 1:30 p.m.
That concludes segment number 2 in today's coverage of the trial of Scot Peterson. There is more to come. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.
This has been a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.